Pick up that trash faster, boy, before I remind you what happens when people like you move too slow." The words cracked through the air like a whip, dripping with venom and superiority, making the crowded lobby fall into an uneasy silence. No one dared to intervene, but everyone sensed it. This insult would not go unpunished forever. The setting was the vast, marble-floored entrance of Branson Coal Industries, a towering corporate headquarters in downtown Chicago. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, glinting off polished brass fixtures. The lobby bustled with employees in sharp suits and polished shoes, briefcases swinging at their sides, their badges clinking faintly as they passed through the turnstiles. Yet all their chatter died down at once, smothered under the weight of one man's cruelty. At the center of this suffocating quiet stood Mr. Richard Branson, Jr., heir to the company and acting CEO. His expensive charcoal gray suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame. His slicked-back blonde hair gleamed like it had been bathed in arrogance, and his manicured hands gestured impatiently at the janitor kneeling on the floor. The janitor, Thomas Green, was a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his late 50s, stooped over with a garbage bag and a dustpan. His uniform was faded, patches sewn clumsily on the elbows, the company logo nearly rubbed away by years of scrubbing floors no one remembered walking on. Sweat beaded at his temples, though the lobby was cool. The sweat wasn't from the work, but from the heat of humiliation. "You deaf, Thomas?" Branson sneered, loud enough for every pair of eyes in the lobby to hear. "Or is bending over too complicated for you?" He laughed a sharp, hollow sound and looked around for approval. A few nervous chuckles trickled from junior employees, eager to curry favor with the boss. Most others stared at the floor, ashamed, pretending their phones had urgent messages. Thomas's hands shook slightly as he reached for the candy wrapper someone had dropped near the reception desk. His voice came quiet, steady, but weighted with dignity. "Yes, sir. I'll take care of it." Branson's smirk widened. He took a step closer, his polished leather shoes clicking on the marble like gunshots. He leaned down just enough for the whole lobby to watch him exert power. "That's right. Because this is your place. On your knees. Cleaning up after people who actually matter." The words burned through Tomas's chest. His jaw clenched, but his eyes didn't rise. He didn't give Branson the satisfaction of visible anger. That restraint only seemed to provoke the younger man more. "You think this company runs on janitors?" Branson barked, straightening his tie theatrically. "You think we need you? Newsflash. Trash bags are cheaper than you are. I could fire you right now and nothing would change." The receptionist, a young woman in a crisp blouse, flinched visibly, her fingers trembling as she typed into her computer, pretending not to hear. A security guard shifted his weight uncomfortably, but didn't move. The lobby seemed to shrink, the marble walls echoing every word until it pressed down on everyone present. Finally, Thomas rose from his knees, wrapper in hand. His movements were slow, deliberate, and silent. His face showed no fury, no plea for sympathy. Only calm, almost frightening calm. Branson interpreted it as defiance. His face reddened. "That's it. You're done. Fired. Effective immediately." The declaration exploded across the room like glass shattering. Employees gasped. Some exchanged wide-eyed glances. Others shook their heads faintly. A junior analyst whispered, "He's really firing him. Right here?" Another hissed, "Shut up, he'll hear you." Thomas's lips parted slightly, as if to respond, but he caught himself. He lowered his gaze, nodded once, and quietly placed the dustpan and broom against the wall. His garbage bag, half filled with scraps from the morning rush, sagged heavily as he set it down. "You heard me," Branson snapped. "Get your things. You don't belong here anymore. You never did." The cruelty in his voice was deliberate, sharpened to pierce not just Thomas, but everyone watching. It was theater, an exhibition of dominance, and it worked. Thomas became suddenly invisible and outcast in a place he had served for years. He felt the heat of dozens of eyes drilling into him, some pitying, some ashamed, others blank, pretending not to see. He had no words left. None would have mattered. Slowly, he turned toward the service door near the back of the lobby. As he walked, his footsteps echoed differently now. Hollow, stripped of belonging. Branson's mocking voice trailed after him. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." The crowd's uneasy silence cracked. Laughter forced, brittle, wrong erupted from a cluster of sycophants near the elevator. They laughed too hard, clapping Branson on the back as though he had just delivered a witty joke rather than a public execution of dignity. But not everyone laughed. The receptionist bit her lip until it bled, her eyes glassy with suppressed anger. The security guard shifted again, fists tightening, though he stayed rooted. A handful of employees avoided looking at Thomas entirely, their shame heavier than their fear. Thomas didn't stop. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He reached the door, placed his hand on the cool metal handle, and pushed it open. Yet before stepping through, he paused. Just for a second, his back straightened, his shoulders squared, and he glanced over his shoulder, not at Branson, not at the laughing employees, but at the lobby itself, the marble, the brass, the towering glass windows. His gaze carried something unreadable pain, yes, but also patience, depth, a quiet storm, gathering far beneath the surface. The door swung shut behind him with a soft metallic click. And in that fragile silence, a single thought lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. What if the man they just watched walk away was not as powerless as he seemed? The receptionist whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer. "He'll regret that." Branson, basking in his own performance, didn't hear her. He was too busy reveling in the sound of his own victory, too blind to realize the stage he had set for his downfall. The lobby resumed its bustle, but the air remained thick with unease, like smoke that refused to clear. Employees forced smiles, hurried conversations, desperate to erase what they had just seen. Yet the image of Thomas, silent, calm, humiliated but unbroken, burned in their minds. Above it all, sunlight still poured through the windows, indifferent, unyielding. The building stood tall and cold, unaware that beneath its marble skin a storm had already begun. Morning smelled like espresso and disinfectant when Richard Branson, Jr. strutted into the lobby. "Good morning, winners," he said, straightening a cuff. "Security, deactivate Thomas Green's badge." The elevator received him like a mirror. "Box his locker," he told the guard. Miller before the door sealed. "If he shows up, walk him out. No exceptions." He smiled at his reflection. "Standards." On 26, Glass swallowed the skyline. Devon, his assistant, handed over a tablet. 9 with a venture. 10 with a legal. "Board wants a restructuring update," he said. "Yesterday's incident is circulating." "Good," Branson said. "Discipline should echo." "Draft a memo. 0 tolerance for underperformance. No severance." Downstairs, the story spread through whispers and screens. The receptionist, Elena, watched her hands shake while she typed name badges. In the coffee line, someone muttered, "He fired Thomas right there." Slack filled with euphemisms. Leadership moment, tone at the top, and then with a link, the security video. Thomas kneeling, the rapper, the word that landed like a slap. A junior accountant, Priya, clicked and immediately regretted it. The image tattooed itself in her mind. She DM'd Elena. "You okay?" Elena sent a storm cloud emoji, then wrote, "He called him boy." The typing bubble pulsed, vanished, returned. "You want to report it?" Priya asked. "Against the CEO?" Elena replied. Branson toured the floor like a judge inspecting cells. "Huddle," he told Sales, gathering them among glass partitions and citrus cleaner. "We're not carrying passengers. If you're not pushing the ship, eat your ballast. Tomorrow, we present to potential buyers. Smile like winners." "Buyers?" someone asked. "Strategic options," he said. "Volatility separates the bold from the bored." Then marketing. New tagline, efficiency with dignity. Delete dignity if legal balks. He winked. Someone flinched. On the service level, bleach and old coffee scented the air. Miller stood by Thomas's locker with a cardboard box, tapping the metal like he might wake a ghost. He'd known Thomas for 8 years. Bulls scores, weather jokes, quiet favors. Elena arrived with a small bag. "He left this at reception," she whispered. A scuffed thermos, mints, a wrinkled photo of a young woman in a graduation gown. "Maya," Miller said. "His daughter. They packed like people folding a flag." Jorge from Knights murmured, "He fixed that busted vacuum." Another custodian said, "Covered my shift when my wife went into labor." Miller sealed the box. "Orders," he said, but his voice had splinters. In the boardroom, Branson performed over graphs that slashed upward. "We're curing cultural plaque," he told managers. Yesterday was a stint. Shareholders crave action. Legal arrived at 10. "Terminations require documentation," she said. "Performance write-ups, prior warnings." "Slow and sloppy," Branson replied. "I saw it. Years of service? Too many." Multiple employees reported racially charged language, Harris said, pen tapping. He shrugged. I said, "Boy." "We are in Chicago," Harris said. "In 2025, risk is high. Discovery will pull the video. Minimize exposure," he said. "Scrub his name from the rota. I don't want ghosts." In the cafeteria, whispers hardened into testimony. Jorge told designers Thomas always left a fresh pot before dawn. A programmer remembered a lost ring returned without a word. A finance intern repeated Branson's line, "Trash bags are cheaper," and the table recoiled. "Somebody should say something," Priya murmured. "HR?" the programmer asked. "Harris will lawyer it into fog." Elena set Thomas's thermos on the table like an artifact. "Peppermint tea," she said. "He said it steadies the hands." Branson kept lighting small fires. The venture team's forecast displeased him. "You're sandbagging," he snapped. "Multiply projections by 1.7. "The street wants facts," someone muttered. He heard and pretended he didn't. At noon, lilies arrived from a rival executive. "Heard you cleaned house. Impressive." Branson placed the bouquet where everyone would see it. "Leadership is an art," he wrote back. By 1, morale had a bruise. The lily's sweetness mingled with solvent. The espresso machine hissed like static. In a stairwell, 2 analysts debated quitting. On the dock, a driver asked where Thomas was to sign for supplies. "Gone," Miller said. The driver whistled. "You people just made trouble." "Not my call," Miller said. Afternoon rumors thickened. An all hands tomorrow to introduce a strategic partner. Branson paced before a mirror wall, practicing the smile he imagined for magazine covers. "Devon, book the auditorium," he said. "We'll show them what power looks like." On her break, Elena reopened the video and froze it on Thomas's face, a look steady enough to anchor a building. Her reflection hung pale above his. "I'm sorry," she whispered, then slipped her phone away. Upstairs, Harris sent a termination letter with caveats about claims. Branson signed without reading. "Send it," he said. "Make it final." As daylight thinned, vacuum cleaners purred. Branson took a last lap, savoring the tremble he left in rooms. He paused at the lobby's marble at the place where Thomas had knelt. He didn't notice Elena at the desk, jaw set, or Miller by the metal detector, fists quiet. He didn't hear the small sound Elena made that wasn't a word yet. Slack revived. A private group formed. 4 digits for a name. Priya posted the clip, then stories, the ring, the coffee, night shifts covered. Someone wrote, "My little brother looks like Thomas." Another, "My father did this work." The last message read, "All hands tomorrow, we show up." Branson stood before the mirrored wall again, rehearsing lines about efficiency and vision. He did not register the silence tight as wire outside his glass. When he finally left, the lilies were drooping, and the thermos sat at Elena's station like a promise. She touched the dent near the lid and felt how cold the metal kept its memory. What nobody understood yet, not sales, not legal, not the rival who sent flowers, was that the story wasn't done humiliating Thomas. It was done humiliating them. The damage they admired was unfinished, and the person they dismissed had more allies than they counted, and something else besides. Tomorrow had sharp teeth. The world knew him as Thomas Green, janitor. A man with a mop in his hand and keys jingling at his hip, a background figure no one paused to look at twice. But that was only the surface, what people saw in a single glance, filtered by uniforms and pay grades. Beneath it lived a story layered in sacrifice, quiet dignity, and storms that had already been weathered. That night, after the humiliation in the marble lobby, Thomas sat at a small kitchen table in his modest South Side apartment. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, the same scent that had followed him home for years. On the table lay a plain cardboard box with his belongings, the dented thermos, a notebook of lists written in careful block letters, a set of spare work gloves, and the photo of his daughter Maya in her graduation gown. The photo drew his eyes most. Maya, with her proud smile and bright brown eyes, wearing the gown of Northwestern University. She was the first in the family to earn a college degree. He'd worked 2 jobs through her childhood, mopping floors at dawn, unloading crates at night, all so she could walk across that stage debt-free. He had ironed that gown himself the morning of the ceremony, his calloused hands trembling with a pride words couldn't carry. He whispered to the photo now, "I kept my promise, baby girl. No matter what." Thomas's past was not simple. Born in Mississippi in 1967, he had come of age in the shadow of segregation's collapse. His father, a sharecropper, had died young, lungs filled with dust and pesticides. His mother raised him and his 3 brothers alone, cleaning houses for white families who paid little and expected silence. From her, Thomas had learned 2 things: the dignity of honest work and the steel of endurance. At 16, he left for Chicago with a duffel bag and $20 in his pocket. He worked whatever jobs he could, dishwasher, construction, street sweeper, until he landed steady employment as a custodian at Branson Coal Industries. Back then, the company had been smaller, less glossy. The older Mr. Branson, Richard Sr., still ran it with a stern but measured hand. It was Richard Sr. who first hired Thomas. The old man had looked over his resume thin as air and said, "You're strong, you're on time, and you look me in the eye. That's enough." For 3 decades, Thomas had cleaned those halls. He'd polished brass railings until they gleamed, scrubbed stains from carpets no one remembered spilling, shoveled snow before dawn so employees could enter safely. He never asked for recognition. His pride came in silence, in the satisfaction of order. People stepped over his work every day without knowing they were walking on his devotion. Yet Thomas was no fool. He knew how the world saw him. Black, aging, working class, invisible. But invisibility had its own power. People spoke freely around him, assuming he was background noise. He overheard boardroom conversations while emptying trash. He knew who embezzled expense reports, who cheated on their taxes, who whispered about corporate takeovers in hushed voices. His mind stored details like a safe no one suspected existed. More importantly, Thomas was connected. In those decades, he had built friendships across the company's strata. Guards, secretaries, even mid-level managers who once confided in him after late nights. And beyond the company walls, his ties ran deeper. His cousin, Leon, had become a prominent civil rights attorney downtown. His church's pastor chaired a community council with political sway. His daughter Maya now worked in finance, consulting for firms that whispered to billionaires. He had never wielded those connections. He didn't believe in pulling strings, not unless pushed to a breaking point. And yesterday, in that lobby, with Branson's voice echoing "boy" like a whip crack through marble, Thomas had felt something break. He poured tea into his thermos that night, the peppermint steam fogging his glasses. As he sipped, he thought of the humiliation replaying across the internet. His neighbor's teenage son had shown him the clip on TikTok. Millions of views already, comments raging, laughing, crying, strangers writing things like, "This man deserved better." He had never sought an audience, but now he had one. And still, he moved carefully. That calm in the lobby, the silence mistaken for weakness, was the same calm he had learned surviving decades of storms. Rage was easy, endurance was power. Around 9, Maya called. Her voice carried the cadence of Wall Street confidence, yet it cracked with concern. "Daddy, I saw the video. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby girl," Thomas said softly. "I've been through worse." "It's not right," she insisted. "He can't talk to you like that. We can sue." Thomas cut her off gently. "We don't fight fire with fire. Not yet. You just keep your head down at work. Don't worry about me." But Maya was her father's daughter, and beneath her words, he heard steel too. "You taught me to fight with my brain, Daddy. So let me. That man doesn't know who he's messing with." Thomas smiled faintly, pride and worry mixing in his chest. "One step at a time, Maya. One step at a time." When he finally turned in, the city outside buzzed with traffic and neon lights, but inside his small apartment, the silence was heavy. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across plaster. Memories surfaced. His mother's weary hands, Richard Sr.'s nod of respect, Maya's graduation gown. All the things he had endured and all the dignity he had preserved. They thought they had stripped him bare in front of the world. They had no idea how much armor a lifetime of humiliation had already built. At dawn, Thomas rose before the sun, as he always had. Habit stronger than humiliation. He brewed coffee, slipped the photo of Maya into his pocket, and opened the window. Cold Chicago air swept in, biting and sharp. His neighbors saw him leave, tall and steady, his shoulders straight despite the storm. They didn't know where he was going. Neither did he, not exactly. But in his silence, a plan was beginning to take shape. A man who had been underestimated his whole life was about to remind the world what? Endurance, connections, and dignity could become when finally called upon. And though Richard Branson Jr. slept soundly in his penthouse, convinced he had erased a janitor from existence, he had in fact awakened something else entirely. By morning, the video was everywhere. Employees scrolled through feeds with tight jaws, pretending to check emails while the clip looped. Thomas kneeling, Branson's voice like a whip, the word boy cracking the air. What had been humiliation in a marble lobby was now humiliation broadcast, in pixels, stripped of context, raw and undeniable. But Branson didn't flinch. He thrived on noise. To him, whispers were proof of relevance. Publicity, he declared during his morning stand-up with senior staff. He spread his arms as if addressing disciples. We're trending. The weaklings cry, the winners clap. Controversy is just unpaid advertising. Devon, his assistant, shifted uncomfortably. Sir, legal advises? Legal advises fear, Branson cut in, slamming a hand on the table. We are not afraid. If a man mops floors, he's a mop. I refuse to apologize for facts. The managers chuckled nervously, like spectators laughing at a tyrant's joke, in hopes of avoiding the lash. Their eyes darted anywhere but toward Devon, who stared down at his tablet, the veins in his temple throbbing. Downstairs, Elena at reception typed with trembling fingers. Every keystroke felt like betrayal. She kept seeing Thomas's calm face in the clip, his silence louder than Branson's cruelty. People leaned against her desk, whispering. Think HR will do anything? Not a chance. He's the CEO's son. Then maybe the board? Boards don't fire their own blood. Even Miller, the security guard, found himself caught between orders and conscience. He had boxed Thomas's belongings like a thief clearing a grave. Now employees passed him with sidelong glances, whispers curling behind his back. He kept his chin down, but shame clung to him like sweat. By mid-morning, Branson made his cruelty policy. He called for an all-hands rehearsal in the auditorium. Tomorrow, he barked, we announce a new partner, new era. I want everyone smiling, polished, and loyal. No freeloaders, no sob stories. He paced the stage during practice, glaring at rows of employees seated stiff as mannequins. You represent Branson Cole, he shouted. Not some janitor who couldn't even keep his job. If you can't stand tall with me, walk out now. No one moved. Fear rooted them in place. Exactly, Branson said, satisfied. Loyalty, discipline, that's how you win. His words rang in the employees' ears long after rehearsal. The auditorium emptied into hallways buzzing with murmurs. He called Thomas a janitor who couldn't keep his job. He's doubling down. Doesn't he realize the video has millions of views already? Some employees vented online anonymously. Tweets and posts flooded the internet. Justice for Thomas began trending locally. Stories emerged. Thomas covering extra shifts, helping new hires find their way, fixing broken machines when facilities wouldn't bother. His invisibility had turned into legend overnight. But inside the building, Branson only sharpened his cruelty. In marketing, he cornered a young designer who dared to speak up. Sir, she began cautiously. About yesterday's incident, maybe a statement would help. Branson leaned in, his smile razor-thin. Do you want to be next? Her face drained. She nodded, whispered, No, sir, and slumped back into silence. He smirked, pleased. Fear was obedience. That afternoon, he summoned Miller to his office. That janitor still got friends in the building? Miller swallowed. Sir, people liked him. He'd been here a long time. Then erase him. Tell people he stole, he lied, whatever it takes. Your head of security secure our reputation." Miller's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." "And if anyone leaks inside gossip again," Branson added, "I'll know it came from you. Don't test me." The guard left with a knot in his gut. He had once been proud to wear that badge. Now, it felt like shackles. By evening, the atmosphere in the building was suffocating. Employees moved like shadows, avoiding eye contact, their laughter forced, their footsteps hurried. The lilies Branson had displayed yesterday sagged in their vase, petals wilting, a faint rotting sweetness mixing with disinfectant in the air. Whispers of Thomas' story grew louder outside the company walls. Local news stations replayed the video, anchors frowning at Branson's words. Commentators debated systemic racism in corporate culture. Civil rights groups tweeted demands for accountability. Still, Branson dismissed it all. He hosted drinks in his penthouse that night, a glittering room with glass walls overlooking the city lights. "They can't touch me," he boasted to a circle of investors. "It's noise. Tomorrow we bring in new capital. That janitor's name won't even exist by next week." He raised a glass of scotch. "To survival of the fittest." The investors chuckled, clinking glasses, though a few glanced at each other uneasily. They had seen empires collapse under the weight of arrogance before. Meanwhile, Thomas walked the streets quietly, the city's neon reflecting in his calm eyes. He wasn't in hiding. He was observing. He passed storefront TVs, playing the clip of his humiliation. Strangers recognized him, some with sympathy, others with outrage. A man stopped him near the L station. "You're the guy," he said. "They did you dirty." Thomas only nodded, thanked him softly, and kept walking. At home, his phone buzzed with messages. His church community wanted to rally. His cousin Leon, the attorney, offered to take the case pro bono. Maya sent furious voice notes, her Wall Street publishers cracking into righteous anger. But Thomas remained deliberate. He wrote in his notebook instead small, neat lists, names of allies, dates, patterns he'd observed in boardroom conversations over the years, secrets he had overheard and filed away in silence. On one page, he wrote, "Patience is power." The next morning, Branson stormed into the lobby, barking at employees who dared glance up from their phones. "Smile, people. Today we show the world strength." His voice boomed across the marble, bouncing against glass and brass, as though trying to scrub away the memory of Thomas kneeling. But the memory clung, etched into stone, replaying on screens, haunting the air. Employees obeyed, but their eyes betrayed them. They avoided his gaze, exchanged subtle nods, whispers behind raised hands. Branson thought it fear. He didn't see it was solidarity. Pressure mounted like a storm cloud. The employees carried shame like stones in their pockets. The public carried outrage like fire. And Branson, drunk on his own arrogance, poured gasoline with every word he spoke. The day closed with a command. "Tomorrow, full auditorium," Branson said. "I'll unveil the future of this company. And anyone not clapping loud enough will find themselves out the door with that janitor." His grin was wide, confident, cruel. He thought he had crushed resistance. He thought he had erased Thomas Green. But in truth, he had only written the prologue to his own downfall. And while the city buzzed with whispers, Thomas sat at his table, pen scratching against paper, drawing plans in silence. The man they called invisible was quietly preparing to be seen in a way that would change everything. Morning cracked open with sirens somewhere far off and the shimmer of rain against the glass facade of Branson Coal. Inside, the building hummed like a wound, over-caffeinated, Underbreathed, every corridor tightened by the rumor that today would decide futures. The auditorium doors yawned like a mouth waiting to swallow everyone whole. Branson arrived in a dark suit that drank the light, a silver tie pin gleaming like a nail. "Places," he commanded, not looking at faces, only at silhouettes he could arrange. Devon scurried beside him, carrying a tablet and a portable mic. "Presser here," Devon said, voice pitched low. "2 business outlets, 1 local station." "Good," Branson replied. "Make sure they get the best angle. Pain photographs well." Down in security, Miller received a sealed envelope stamped Executive Order. Inside, a list of names. Some he recognized from the private Slack group. A chill walked his spine. The note at the bottom was handwritten in Branson's tight, controlled letters. "If any of these underperform during QA, escort them out. Immediate termination. Cameras rolling." Miller looked up at the monitors. Employees filing into the auditorium, eyes down, hands white around paper coffee cups. Elena paused at reception, fingers grazing the dent in Thomas's thermos as if it were a talisman. She set it beneath her desk, hidden from the cameras. Backstage, Branson rehearsed cruelty like an aria. "We are stronger without dead weight," he said to his reflection. "We are lean, efficient, unafraid to amputate." He smiled, and the smile did not meet his eyes. Harris from legal approached with a folder. "Before you go on," she said, "we've drafted the settlement package for Green. Minimal, but it might—" "No settlement," Branson snapped. "I want scorched earth. File a countersuit for defamation. Claim he threatened staff. Have PR circulate that he falsified timesheets." Harris hesitated. "There's no evidence." "Make the absence the narrative," he said. "Say records are missing because he sabotaged the system on his way out." He pivoted to Devon. "Schedule a cybersecurity audit. Leak an internal memo about a breach. Blame Green." Devon's Adam's apple bobbed. "Yes, sir." The first row of the auditorium filled with investors and board members, their shoes expensive and expressions bored. Behind them, the employees settled into tight, careful silence. The stage lights baked the air. A giant screen glowed with the company logo, then cut to a sizzle reel, drones over factory floors, smiling models in staged offices, a tagline pulsing, "Efficiency, without compromise." Elena slipped into a seat near the back, palms damp. Priya leaned toward her. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. "I do," Elena said. "Someone has to watch." Music sharpened. Branson stepped into the light, greeted by applause that was more reflex than respect. He soaked it in like a lizard on a hot rock. "Good morning, winners," he said. "Today we cut away what holds us back." He gestured, and the screen flashed charts surging upward, a future pre-sold. "I'm proud to announce a strategic partnership with Norcrest Capital," he continued. "A union that secures our dominance in the next decade." The Norcrest logo appeared cold and clean, a murmur. Everyone knew Norcrest for ruthless optimization buy, strip, resell. "We will be restructuring Bandy," Branson said. Emphasis on accountability. He let the word hang, heavy as an axe. "Some roles will sunset. Those misaligned with our values will be invited to pursue opportunities elsewhere." He paced, voice thick with theater. Yesterday, a certain narrative tried to paint this company as cruel. A video edited, lacking context, spread lies. The man at the center, Thomas Green, was let go for cause. The screen shifted to an incident summary. Bullet points accusing Thomas of tardiness, insubordination, data tampering. A still photo from some midnight shift showed Thomas near a server closet, a mop handle leaning like a rifle. Elena's breath caught. She knew that hallway. She'd seen him fix a leak there. Priya whispered, "That's doctored." Branson's voice slicked over the image. "We value dignity, but we value truth more, and the truth is we cannot and will not coddle liability." He signaled. Lights rose slightly. Questions? Silence at first, then a hand. A designer, the one he'd threatened. "Sir," she said, voice wavering, "the clip, many of us were there. It wasn't edited. Thomas, was respectful." The room tightened. Cameras tracked. Branson smiled without warmth. "Thank you for your feelings," he said. "Security?" Miller's earpiece hissed. He stood throat thick and started down the aisle. The designer's eyes went wide, then glassy. Elena half rose, then sank, nails biting her palms. Phones lifted. The press leaned forward like wolves scenting blood. Branson faced the cameras. "This is not a circus," he declared. "We maintain standards. Disruption has consequences." 2 guards reached the designer. She stood trembling but straight. "I withdraw my question," she said, voice small. Branson waved them to sit. "Consider this mercy," he said smoothly. Laughter from the investor row. Brittle, carnivorous. Another hand, a middle manager from operations. "Sir, rumor says pensions are on the block under Norcrest. Is that true?" Branson's smile sharpened. "Rumors are for children. Adults read balance sheets." He tapped the tablet. The screen changed to a slide. "Streamline legacy costs. We will restructure retirement packages to reflect modern realities." A moan moved through the rows, like wind through dead grass. "Next," he said. No one moved. The QA died on its feet. He pivoted. "Before we close, a note on values." His cadence slowed, intimate, menacing. "There is a sickness in corporate culture, coddling the mediocre. We will be a vaccine. We will cut, cauterize, and claim the future." He lifted a hand, and the music swelled again. Backstage, Harris whispered to Devon, "He's lighting himself on fire." Devon stared at the tablet. On the security cam feed, the lobby showed rain painting the glass in silver threads. A tall figure stood outside the revolving doors, umbrella lowered, suit dark, posture straight. For a heartbeat, Devon thought the impossible. He blinked. The figure turned away, lost. Branson ended with a flourish. "To efficiency," he said. "To courage." Applause rose, reluctant and ragged. The investors stood first, setting the rule. Cameras cut. The sizzle reel restarted, louder, like a curtain trying to drown shame. In the hall afterward, layoff packets appeared as if conjured. HR rolled carts stacked with envelopes. Names were called. Some people cried. Others stood with cheeks numb. Priya clutched hers like a verdict. Inside, a thin severance, a thicker NDA, a warning about disparagement. "Sign here," the HR rep murmured. "Return by 3. Elena approached without a packet. "Am I?" "Reception is being outsourced," the rep said, eyes sliding away. "Your packet's printing." Elena swallowed hard. "What about Thomas's benefits?" "He had health coverage." The rep's mouth twitched. "Terminated for cause, no continuation." The words hit like a body blow. Behind them, Miller stared at his own envelope. The letter inside already familiar in its cruelty. Security would be privatized. Senior guards redundant. His name sat there. A clean excision. Branson strode through the corridor like a conquering general. "Smile," he told a man with red eyes. "This is a beginning, not an end." In a quiet pocket by the service elevator, Elena, Priya, and Miller clustered like survivors after a storm. "They're erasing him," Priya whispered. "They'll sue him into silence." Miller pressed thumb and forefinger into his brow. "He's got no paycheck, no coverage, and now they'll say he's a thief. A man can drown in that." Rain deepened outside, drumming on the roof. The world smelled of wet metal and printer ink and lilies turning sweetly rotten. Somewhere, a TV in the cafeteria replayed Branson's speech. The volume was up too loud. By late afternoon, the lobby was a procession of cardboard boxes. Security badges clinked into plastic bins like teeth. Branson watched from the mezzanine, arms folded, satisfied. He turned to Devon. Tomorrow, we announce the merger formally, draft a statement. 0 tolerance, 0 regret. Devon nodded without speaking. His tablet buzzed with messages he didn't open. At 5, Elena locked her drawer. She pulled out Thomas's thermos and held it like a small, defiant flame. She didn't know what to do with it, only that giving it back felt impossible, and throwing it away felt obscene. Outside, the rain gathered itself into sheets. People without umbrellas sprinted to the L, clutching packets to their chests. The city's neon smeared in the flooded streets. Thunder stitched the sky. From his penthouse window, Branson raised a glass to his reflection. He saw a winner staring back. A man too big to fail, too cold to bleed. Across town, in a quiet apartment, Thomas sat at his kitchen table under a single lamp. He unfolded a newspaper, read about the partnership, the layoffs. For cause. His jaw tightened. When he looked up, the room looked back, small, clean, patient. On the table, his notebook lay open to the words he'd written the night before. Patience is power. He closed the book gently, as if not to wake a sleeping animal. Outside, the rain did not let up. Rain softened into mist the next morning, draping the city in a gray veil. The Branson coal tower rose above it like a blade, glass catching what little light broke through. Inside, employees moved quietly, hunched beneath invisible weight. Their steps echoed in halls that once hummed with chatter. But not everyone wore despair. Beneath the silence, something else was stirring. In the cafeteria, whispers coiled around paper cups. He doctored those slides, one accountant murmured, eyes flicking toward the ceiling cameras. Thomas never tampered with servers. A programmer leaned in. I saw him fix that leak. He wasn't hacking. He was mopping. Careful, another warned. They'll fire you just for saying his name. Yet, the whispers didn't die. They grew. In her cubicle, Elena pressed her thumb against Thomas's dented thermos. She hadn't let it leave her side since the day he walked out. Its cool metal was steadying, like a secret heartbeat. On her screen, an email blinked open anonymous sender, no subject line. Check your phone. She frowned, slid her phone from her drawer. A video file waited in her inbox. She tapped it. Grainy footage filled the screen. Thomas, years earlier, helping a collapsed employee in the lobby. Lifting her with care, calling for an ambulance. He stayed by her side until paramedics arrived. The clip cut off. Attached was a single line. There's more where this came from. Elena's pulse quickened. She glanced over the cubicle wall, half expecting Branson's icy eyes, but no one was watching her. Meanwhile, Devon sat in the executive wing, tablet glowing. He scrolled through inboxes, suppressing the tremor in his hand. He had been Branson's assistant for 3 years, witness to arrogance distilled into cruelty. But last night, he had seen something that unsettled him. An encrypted email. No sender, no traceable IP. Inside, scanned documents, decades old, bearing the signature of Richard Branson Sr., contracts, amendments, handwritten notes. At first glance, corporate minutia, but one detail clawed at Devon's gut. The signature line, Witness Thomas Green. Green's name appeared dozens of times, not as custodian, not as invisible labor, as a witness to deals, transactions, partnerships, some with Norcrest Capital itself. Why? Devon flipped pages like a man searching for air. In margin notes, Richard Sr. had written phrases. Thomas present for integrity, Green to confirm fairness. Richard Sr. had trusted the janitor not just trusted, required his presence as moral ballast in critical negotiations. Devon set the tablet down, hand to his forehead. He realized with a jolt, Thomas Green knew more about the company's buried history than anyone alive, and Branson Jr. had fired him in front of the world. At lunch, Miller sat in the security office, packet of termination papers unopened on the desk. He stared at camera feeds looping across walls. Employees ate in silence, eyes on phones, shoulders tight. He keyed into archived footage, dates, times, and there it was, years of recordings where Thomas's quiet presence threaded through the company's life, talking with delivery men, fixing broken locks, holding doors open for late workers, always there. One file caught Miller's eye, boardroom footage from 12 years ago. Richard Sr. at the head of the table, Thomas standing quietly by the wall. A heated argument, voices raised over a merger. Then Richard Sr.'s hand slamming down. "We bring Green in," the old man barked. "If he says the deal stinks, it stinks." Thomas had stepped forward, calm and deliberate, pointing out a hidden clause that would have gutted pensions. The deal collapsed. Miller leaned back, gooseflesh rising. "He saved them," he muttered. He pressed export. That evening, Maya sat in her Manhattan office, skyscrapers glittering outside. She had worked late, fury fueling her. Her desk was strewn with financial reports, Norcrest press releases, acquisition rumors. She sipped cold coffee, eyes narrowing. Her laptop pinged with a secure message. From Leon, the cousin, the civil rights lawyer. "We have grounds," it read. Attached, labor laws, discrimination cases, precedents. But more importantly, a folder of articles on whistleblower statutes. If Thomas knew what Devon and Miller were uncovering, if he carried proof of corruption, pension theft, illegal restructuring, then firing him wasn't just cruelty. It was retaliation. Maya's heart hammered. She typed back, "Keep digging, he's not just their janitor, he's their witness." In his penthouse, Branson poured another drink, oblivious. "Tomorrow's the announcement," he told his reflection. "Norcrest takes the bait, we walk away rich. Green, forgotten." But the city outside whispered otherwise. Social media swelled. Justice for Thomas trended globally. Journalists called the company for comment. Civil rights leaders drafted statements. And Thomas? He sat in his modest kitchen, notebook open. Tonight, he didn't write lists. He drew lines, connecting names, dates, deals he had overheard. Decades of silence now mapped like a puzzle only he could solve. He thought of Richard Sr. He thought of the times he'd been summoned into boardrooms not to clean, but to listen. At first he hadn't understood. Then one day, Richard Sr. had leaned in close and said, "Thomas, men respect you because you don't lie. That makes you more valuable than half this table." Thomas closed his eyes, hearing those words again, feeling their weight. Now, the son had forgotten, but the father's trust still lingered in contracts, in memories, in the quiet witnesses who still lived. Back at Branson Coal, Elena received another anonymous message. This time, only 2 words. "Tomorrow changes." Her hands trembled as she read it. The next dawn, the city glittered under wet streets. Employees trudged toward the tower, some carrying boxes already, expecting pink slips. Branson strode through the lobby, basking in cameras, snapping his photo. He was all teeth and polish, convinced the day would cement his reign. But beneath the marble, through the hum of elevators and the silence of cubicles, threads were pulling tight. Employees whispering, security guards exporting files, lawyers aligning statutes, a daughter tracing financial veins, and at the center, calm as ever, Thomas Green. He had been invisible for 30 years. Now, invisibility was his weapon. No one saw him coming. The auditorium smelled of damp coats and stale anxiety when the employees filed in the next morning. The storm had broken outside, leaving puddles that mirrored the glass tower's sharp edges. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed like a warning. Security guards lined the walls. Press badges gleamed in the front row. Branson entered last, flanked by Devon with the tablet and Harris from legal, her face pale. He moved like a man already victorious, shoes clicking against polished wood, smile stretched taut. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice swelling with theater. "Today marks the rebirth of Branson Coal. A new partnership, a new era, efficiency, courage, dominance." The Norcrest executives shifted in the front row, sleek in their gray suits. Their expressions were calculating, like gamblers watching dice tumble. Branson gestured toward the screen. Charts flared upward, slogans scrolled. "This company is not for the weak," he said. "And when we cut dead weight, we rise. Yesterday's noise, the lies about a disgruntled ex-employee, they end here." He paused for applause. A smattering followed, thin, hesitant. Then a sound cut through the auditorium. The creak of a side door. Heads turned. A man stepped in, tall and steady, suit pressed, shoes shining despite the rain. Thomas Green. The air snapped. Whispers ricocheted down the aisles like sparks. Cameras swiveled. Elena's hands clutched the thermos in her lap, knuckles white. Branson froze, a flicker of disbelief cracking his mask. "Security!" he snapped, voice sharp. But Miller didn't move. None of the guards did. They stared at Thomas, as if recognizing something larger than uniforms or paychecks. Thomas walked slowly, calmly, down the center aisle. His posture was unbowed, his eyes steady. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm. When he reached the stage, he did not look at Branson first. He looked at the employees, the secretaries, the programmers, the janitors who still wore his uniform color. "You've all seen the video," Thomas said, voice deep, carrying without force. "You saw what was said, but you don't know everything." The room hushed. Branson barked, "Escort him out! Now!" Still, no one moved. Thomas opened the portfolio, laid it gently on the podium, beside Branson's pristine slides. Papers spread contracts, memos, copies of board minutes. "For 30 years, he said, "I swept floors here. I was invisible. But sometimes invisible people see more than anyone else." Gasps rippled as Devon, trembling, tapped the tablet. The giant screen behind them flickered, then shifted from Branson's slides to a scanned contract. Cameras zoomed, headings glared in black ink. Pension Restructuring Agreement 2009. Witness line. Thomas Green. Murmurs rose. Thomas continued. "Mr. Branson Sr. had me witness major deals, not as an attorney, not as a shareholder, but as a man he trusted to tell the truth. I saw contracts that stole from your pensions, deals that gutted jobs, partnerships that funneled money offshore, and I was asked to sign to confirm I'd been in the room. That I had seen." The Norcrest executives stiffened, eyes darting toward each other. Branson's face reddened. "Lies! Fabrications! You're a janitor! Nothing more!" Thomas turned his gaze to him for the first time. Calm. Heavy. "I was a witness. Your father trusted me. You called me boy. He called me truth." Gasps again. Employees shifted forward, their fear beginning to burn into something sharper. Devon clicked again. Another document appeared, this one scrawled with margin notes. Richard Branson Sr. His handwriting. Thomas present. Ensure integrity. The investors in the front row leaned forward. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. Harris from legal pressed her fingers to her temple, whispering, "Oh my God!" Branson lunged toward the podium, but Miller stepped between them, broad and unmoving. "Sir," Miller said, evenly, "sit down." It was the first time anyone had told him that. Branson stumbled, shocked. His eyes darted, searching for control that no longer bent toward him. Thomas's voice cut through the honey. "You think silence is weakness? But silence remembers. Silence observes. And silence, when it breaks, is louder than any man's cruelty." He held up a final sheet. "This," he said, "is proof of unlawful collusion with Norcrest. Pension funds diverted, benefits stripped. I saw it, I signed it, and now the world will too." Devon pushed the document live on the screen. Gasps turned to shouts. Phones lifted, photos snapped. The Norcrest executives rose abruptly, faces thunderous. One hissed into his phone, "Cancel the signing! Pull out now!" The auditorium erupted, employees shouting, reporters surging forward, security caught between duty and relief. Branson clawed at the microphone. "He's lying! He's a fraud! He has no right—" But the noise swallowed him. His voice cracked against a tide that no longer feared him. Elena stood, thermos in hand, raising it high. "For Thomas!" she shouted. The employees roared. The chant spread. "For Thomas! For Thomas!" Branson's face twisted, pale and furious. He looked small now, dwarfed by the crowd, his voice lost in the storm. Thomas didn't shout. He didn't need to. He stepped back from the podium, letting the evidence speak, letting the truth roll forward like thunder. And in that moment, Richard Branson, Jr. finally understood. The man he had fired in front of everyone was not gone. He was not erased. He was the center of the story. The auditorium had become a battlefield. Chants for Thomas echoed off the rafters. Journalists shouted questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. In the middle of it all, Richard Branson, Jr. stood pale and trembling, his carefully crafted armor cracking with every second. "Order!" he barked into the microphone, voice breaking. "This is my company!" But no one was listening. The Norcrest executives had already stormed out, their briefcases snapping shut like verdicts. Investors whispered among themselves, eyes darting toward Thomas instead of Branson. The employees, once cowed into silence, now surged with defiance. Thomas didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply gathered the papers back into his leather portfolio, calm as a man folding laundry. The weight of truth hung heavier than Branson's shrill protests. Devon stepped forward, microphone in hand. His face was pale, but his voice rang clear. "Effective immediately," he said. "The board has suspended Richard Branson, Jr. is authority. Pending investigation." Gasps erupted. Branson spun toward him, eyes wide. "You can't!" Devon didn't flinch. "We can, and we have." Two board members rose from the front row, stern and deliberate. One adjusted his glasses, voice like gravel. "Mr. Branson, please vacate the stage." Branson lunged at Thomas, spittle flying. You did this! A janitor!" His words twisted into something raw and pathetic, the arrogance stripped to desperation. Miller stepped forward, blocking him with a wall of muscle. This time, when he reached for the CEO's arm, there was no hesitation. The crowd erupted into cheers as Branson was escorted from the stage, his protests shrill, his face red and wet with rage. "Get your hands off me! This is my company!" he screamed, kicking at the floor, his polished shoes squealing against the wood. Cameras caught it all, the mighty air dragged out like a child in tantrum. And just like that, silence fell. All eyes turned back to Thomas. He didn't grandstand. He didn't gloat. He simply straightened, met the gaze of the employees, and spoke in that calm, steady tone that had carried him through decades. "I spent 30 years cleaning this place," he said. "Every night I saw the dust nobody noticed. Every morning I erased the footprints of people who didn't even see me. But I was here. I saw what was hidden. And today, I brought it into the light." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. She lifted the thermos again, holding it high. Others followed, phones, notebooks, fists in the air. A tide of respect Thomas had never asked for, but had always deserved. The board members conferred quickly. Then one stepped forward. "Mr. Green," he said formally, "given your role as a long-standing witness to the company's dealings, and given the immediate crisis in leadership, we are asking you to serve as interim custodian of the company until a permanent structure is determined." A hush fell. Branson's former allies looked stunned. Employees leaned forward. Cameras zoomed. Thomas blinked, steady but surprised. "Interim custodian?" "Yes," the board member said. "You are the one person in this building who holds both knowledge and trust. This company cannot move forward without you." Thomas exhaled slowly. He thought of his mother's tired hands, of Richard Sr.'s words, of Maya's fierce determination. He thought of the years he had spent unseen. And then he nodded. "I'll do it," he said. "But not as you mean. Not to protect profits. To protect people." The crowd roared. That evening, headlines exploded. Janitor topples CEO in public showdown. Thomas Green, fired in humiliation, returns as company's moral compass. Norcrest backs out amid scandal, Branson Jr. removed from power. Clips of the confrontation flooded every feed. The image of Thomas standing calm with his portfolio went viral, captioned, "Truth doesn't kneel." Civil rights leaders called him a hero. Politicians demanded investigations into Branson's corruption. The SEC opened inquiries. Lawsuits piled at the company's door. And Thomas? He went home to his small apartment that night, the thermos polished on his table, Maya waiting by the door with tear-streaked cheeks and open arms. She hugged him tight, whispering, "Daddy, you did it." "No," he said softly, kissing her forehead. "We did it." Days passed. The company transformed. Pensions were restored, layoffs frozen. The culture that had reeked of fear now buzzed with hope. Employees walked taller. Elena was promoted to HR liaison for culture reform. Miller, once ashamed, now led a committee for workplace integrity. Priya drafted a petition that became a blueprint for equity programs. And at the center sat Thomas. Not at a corner office desk. Not in a penthouse suite, but in a modest room with a round table. No hierarchy. No marble. Just space for people to speak. He didn't call himself CEO, he called himself caretaker. "I cleaned floors," he told them. "Now I clean shadows. Same job, different broom." The employees laughed, not at him, but with him. As for Branson Jr., his fall was merciless. Stripped of authority, sued for fraud, deserted by investors, he became a pariah overnight. The same cameras that once worshipped his swagger now replayed his tantrum on loop. His shrieks of, "This is my company," turned into memes, his arrogance dissected on talk shows. He sat in silence in his penthouse, glass walls now cages, the city lights indifferent to his ruin. On Sunday morning, Thomas returned to church. The pews were packed, neighbors, co-workers, strangers who had seen his story online. The choir sang louder than usual. When the pastor called him forward, Thomas shook his head. But the applause dragged him anyway. "I didn't win anything," he told the congregation. "I just told the truth. That's all I've ever had to give." His voice broke for the first time. Maya reached up, holding his hand, and the crowd rose, clapping, cheering, chanting his name not as a janitor, not as a victim, but as a man who had restored dignity in a place that had forgotten it. That night, Thomas sat again at his kitchen table, notebook open. He didn't write lists. He didn't write plans. He wrote one line, neat and steady. Sometimes the smallest broom sweeps the biggest room. He closed the notebook, sipped peppermint tea from his dented thermos, and finally allowed himself to smile. The city outside glittered. Justice had been done. And in the quiet of his home, Thomas Green, once invisible, now unforgettable, rested.